So
I
maybe
got
because
feedback for you. Shut up.
I have feedback for you. Allahu Akbar.
Jihadi.
All right,
Allah
thank
Akbar.
you. I'll do. Hello and welcome to another episode of Political Dregs. I'm Calvin Robinson, and with me is Joel Davidson, Amir Sajadi, and Hamish Hunter. Happy New Year, guys!
Happy New Year.
Happy New Decade. Everyone. Happy New Decade, everybody. 2020, Here we go.
Interesting start to the year. World War III. Obviously, I'm no expert in foreign policy or in the Middle East, but we do have an Iranian on the podcast. So if Amir, you'd like to start us off by talking us through your perspective of current events, that'd be fantastic.
Yes, so Qasem Soleimani, he is actually a war hero from the Iran-Iraq War, and he was the Major General of the IRGC, which is the revolutionary section of the military infrastructure in Iran. He was assassinated by the Americans on Friday morning. They launched a missile strike against his entourage just outside of Baghdad airport. And this is actually very significant because this raises the game to a new level. This is unprecedented. It's never happened before. He isn't just, as the Americans would say, a terrorist or acting independently on his own tangent. He is actually part of the military infrastructure. He's part of the Iranian government in some way or means, and he has a large portion of the military and the national budget under his control. So he has a huge influence and a huge reach across the whole of the Middle East, from Syria to Iraq to obviously Iran and Yemen and other kind of Persian Gulf Arab state countries. So he was very instrumental in fighting against ISIS, or Daesh, as some people call it. They actually feared him greatly, and he was pivotal in preventing ISIS from continuing on their gravy train from Mosul to Tehran. He actually stopped them. So he had significant alliances with the Kurds in northern Iraq, and obviously he was very close to the post 2003 Iraqi government, and he was well respected. He was well known. He was very popular, especially within kind of the Iranian remit. He was kind of seen as this kind of heroic kind of father figure of the revolution in many ways. And regardless of his background, regardless of all the kind of potential perceived atrocities that he had committed, he was very well liked. And this is well beyond just killing a rogue terrorist. This is well beyond killing kind of someone like an Osama bin Laden type character, who was basically in his kind of retirement, kind of in a cave. This was an active, influential, significant member of the Iranian authorities and government, and he had a huge amount of wealth and kind of military infrastructure and forces under his control. And obviously the Americans took him out, and this is basically an act of war. Now, the Americans have said that he was planning attacks, and that may well be true. We still haven't seen any kind of evidence, hasn't been published yet. But the question is now, what's going to happen? I'm not quite sure. Not many people do know what's going to happen, because yesterday the Iranians attacked 2 American bases in Iraq, and it seems to be that they gave the Iraqis warning. It seems like that they weren't intending to kill anyone, and after they attacked those 2 bases, members of the Iranian government posted Iranian flags on Twitter, which was kind of like, they were almost like trolling Donald Trump and saying, we can attack you. But at the same time, they posted a message saying, we can attack, we will retaliate. but we want to de-escalate. And so the question now is whether the war is going to happen, whether this is going to kind of escalate or de-escalate. I mean, America is still obviously trying to bring Iran back to the negotiating table, and the Americans unilaterally left the nuclear treaty signed by Barack Obama and 5 other countries. And so this is a real question. I mean, today Trump said...
Well, before we get into speculation, Amir, thank you. That was a great rundown of events. And I know Joel's jumping at the chance to get in here, but I want to clarify what your stance was there, because you used the term war hero, you used the term perceived atrocities. You didn't once mention the Iranian attack on the US embassy or the Iraqi attack on the US embassy. So I just want to figure out where you stand on this and if you're condoning or condemning the killing of Soleimani.
I mean, I'm not condoning. I'm not condemning. I'm in shock actually, because there is no known future in this kind of action. This was completely unprecedented. There was a line that had been previously drawn by George W. Bush, by Obama, by the UK government, where they had this person in their sights with the ability to take him out many years ago. And they didn't cross that line. This, like I said, this wasn't an independent terrorist organization acting on their own accord based on their religious fervor and beliefs. This was a recognized, respected member of the Iranian government. He was a high-ranking military general. So this really takes it to another level. Now, I mean, a lot of people say that he was a bad person. Obviously, that's probably true. I mean, he's probably caused a lot of deaths across the whole of the Middle East through his indirect or direct action, through his control of his military forces. I'm not a judge. I'm not the jury. I don't have.
Let's pause it there. Let's see what Joel's got to say on this.
Well, I coming from the right, despite many on the right, I am somewhat cautious about this action. I think it's really crossed some lines, as Amir said. I think we are looking to condone here an action that is against a state actor and not a non-state actor, such as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and those are the really bad guys who have attacked and killed British citizens many times, and many people have been inspired to attack British citizens because of their ideology. So I think we need to be really clear about that. So I'm a little bit concerned. Yeah, I mean, without sounding all Jeremy Corbyn here, I do think that this is an attack on a state actor. They are not a nice country, not a nice regime. And I really, I know we've got Hampstead's John Bolton here, who's gonna step in soon and talk about how he wants to obliterate them. But I just think I don't know if it's my age or being a parent or something, but I don't really think that going to war with Iran is a good idea in any way, really.
Speaking as the father of the daughter.
Well, you may hear that again, but no, I just think that there have been some lines crossed, and I'm very concerned about. I'm very sceptical, about the impact on British citizens. And I think even the Prime Minister has not been particularly over the top in terms of condoning this attack. So I think there is some nuance from the British perspective here. So
before Hamish jumps in, Joel, would you send a strongly worded letter?
Maybe an email, no.
So a modern Corbyn, then, is what you're saying?
I would I would obliterate the terrorist threats wherever possible against this country. But I certainly wouldn't be as gung-ho as some here about taking at face value anything the Trump administration says.
But I mean, Joel, he was feared by ISIS. He's feared by Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
he was feared by.
We've covered that, so let's see what Hamish has got to say on this then.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we've covered it. I really don't think you.
We can come back to it, but let's hear Hamish's thoughts.
No, let's hear the guns are trained. So let's hear the nukes are about to launch from Hampstead.
Well, I have to say that I am somewhat surprised by what I've been hearing from Joel and Amir. This guy was clearly a nasty piece of work. He was clearly instrumental in funding and supporting terror attacks and other activities which are against our interests as the United Kingdom, but also more generally the Western alliance under NATO. The Americans had an opportunity to take him out. They took it. They popped a cap in his ass. Why are we not rejoicing? It's as far as I'm concerned, it's as simple as that. Yeah, okay, so he was fighting ISIS, but the enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend, and I don't understand what objective Joel and Amir are looking for here. We are part of NATO. We assist the United States and our other NATO allies in keeping peace and protecting our interests across the globe. There's nothing that I've heard that has persuaded me that the world is a less good place or less safe place now that this guy has been wiped.
No, but you give this guy way too much credit. Okay, the organizations, the infrastructure, the funding, all of that still remains. I mean, all of the proxy groups, the proxy. You're talking about Hezbollah, Hamas, organization, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Houthi rebels. They're all still funded. They're all still there. They all still have their infrastructures. They all still have their leaders. I mean, this guy's now dead. What's going to happen? Another guy's going to take his place. It's not like Osama bin Laden and then there's a vacuum.
Well, that's an argument. That's an argument not to do anything in any circumstances, because unless that argument is essentially saying unless you can solve the problem 100%, then you shouldn't do anything towards making it better. Yeah, of course, it was just one guy, but it was also an important show of strength. And I think the Iranian regime needed to be put back in its box a little bit and reminded exactly who is, frankly, boss, and that's the NATO alliance headed by the United States.
No, but the message hasn't been delivered.
Well, it actually has
because Iran's strength is asymmetric warfare. Okay, they would never win a.
The United States have taken out a man who's been widely regarded as the number 2 man in the Iranian regime. In response, all Iran has dared to do, all it's been able to do, is bomb a couple of bases and kill nobody. Right? They're not going to
it's early days.
It's early days, but I think we can take them.
Their strength is not full frontal confrontation with a significantly superior military force. Okay, of course, it would be mad for Iran to engage in that kind of warfare. The reality is that their strength lies in guerrilla operations, counterinsurgency, asymmetric warfare. That's where their strength lies. So actually, we haven't done anything except killed someone who many Iranians, whether rightly or wrongly so, regard as a father figure, as a war hero. And what we've actually done is solidified the Iranian government's position within the country, because it was only last month in December where over 1,500 Iranians were killed in protests. So Iran was already in a state of domestic struggle, domestic instability. And what we've actually done is we've solidified the government's position within the country. Any form of internal opposition or protest or anything like that has now been quashed and quenched.
So let's ask.
That shows me that it wasn't very serious to begin with.
Let's ask our neocon friends then. So let the CR and NHH. Do you believe Mike Pence? What that bullshit that Mike Pence came up with, that suddenly conjured up from somewhere? 9/11 was also inspired, or that Soleimani was also behind 9/11. A unique Shia Sunni alliance, the first time ever in thousands of years of history that the Saudis and Shias have allied apparently over 9/11. The biggest load of shit I've ever seen, and that's saying something from this Trump administration. Do you really believe that?
No.
So okay. frankly, I think it's relevant. I think that this guy might
relevant what the US Vice President tweets
because I think this is a guy who helped train and support Hezbollah. This is a guy who orchestrated an attack on the US embassy. This is one of the most dangerous men in the world, and the United States of America had an opportunity to take him out, and they did, and that's a good thing for everyone.
No, but based on your logic, yeah, I mean, okay, let's say your logic is sound. Based on your logic,
Usually
the American who created Al-Qaeda, inadvertently created ISIS, the people who trained these people before they became terrorists, should also be taken out by anyone who perceives them to be as terrorist creators. I mean, it doesn't really...
That's not what I said at all.
Well, yeah, you did.
Well, who would that be then?
The CIA or any kind of operative.
Yeah,
I mean...
This is the problem, right? I think we've got to all come from the same starting position, that this guy was a bad guy.
Yes. And
he was a threat to the world generally and to the Western alliance in particular. He was a threat to the United States. He was a threat to British troops. He was a threat to Israelis. Had he got his way and people in his regime, we would not be where we are now, and Israel would be driven into the sea. Proceeding from that basis, which I think is frankly uncontroversial, if the United States have an opportunity to take him out, then they should do, because apart from anything else, it's solidifying the position of the Western alliance, of the United States, as the world's only superpower, a position which I'm glad to see that, contrary to the America First rhetoric of Donald Trump, is actually not being echoed in his foreign policy actions, because one of my greatest concerns about the previous administration and generally about America is if it retreats from its position of global dominance and military strength, then it will be replaced by something which is more invidious to us in the liberal, tolerant West. And I don't want to see that.
We should not be intervening in areas of the world where we have no kind of deep and in-depth knowledge of their cultures and their systems. We should not be intervening.
Yes, exactly, Amir. I would like to use the words of Lord Palmerston, a great hero of mine and a great hero of the show. We have no permanent interests. We have no eternal allies, or something like that.
On this very podcast, Joel, you've been arguing that we should stand up for Western values against the camps that are going on in China and all this horrible atrocities across the world.
Yep.
In Iran, they're stoning people to death for being homosexual. They're locking women up for taking their veils off. Why should we not make a stand for Western values?
Yeah, but this is not the right way of making a stand.
By imposing sanctions, by having a strong...
Are they working?
Stance. Well,
and they were actually. The sanctions were very effective. Inflation in Iran is at 40-50%. The people are unemployed. They have no money. They were rising up. Petrol prices increased 300%.
They're always rising up in Iran. You know that more than anyone, Amir.
Okay, but the reality is that, it is unprecedented that 1,500 Iranians would be killed in protests. The fact of the matter is that the sanctions were working. And what the West has now done is allowed the Iranian government, the Islamic regime, to recreate a narrative where, again, America is the aggressor. So what's going to happen? Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but what could happen?
Why speculate?
Is that what could happen?
I just want to jump in here because I really strongly disagree with this notion that we shouldn't be interested or interfering with stuff that happens on the other side of the world. Now, yes, Calvin makes a good point about the fact that the Iran domestically is an unpleasant, illiberal place to live. I don't think that necessarily justifies taking.
It's very pleasant, actually, not unpleasant.
Well, I don't think it would be that pleasant for me, right?
That's not true. You'd actually have a really good time.
Well, you wouldn't, really, obviously.
Or Joel, or other people, right?
Or Joel, what? Are you outing me?
I mean, the Iranians are actually significantly hospitable.
I'm only outing you as a proud Jew.
Oh, okay. Yes, indeed.
But so that's not necessarily that is not necessarily a reason to bomb them. But in a world that we live in, where a man can decide to hate me and people who live like me, strap on a bomb, come over here, blow himself up, or indeed pay people to do that, then it very well is my problem.
Yeah,
and
that's
it is something which I'm interested.
Iranians aren't strapping on bombs. They're not sending them over to the West.
It's funding people like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and all of these people who are coming, who are a direct threat to me and my people more broadly.
What about
whether it's
Russia?
Israelis, whether it's British troops or American troops, and that is my business. And if we can take them out, then we should bloody well fucking take them out.
Look, I mean, Calvin was talking about how we should create a balanced approach where we're pressing against China and their kind of actions against their own people, and we should do the same with Iran. But at the moment, it's not balanced because Saudi Arabia commits unbelievable human rights violations against their own people, and yet they're our number one ally in the Middle East. We're gladly selling arms to them, and they're causing unbelievable destruction in Yemen, and we have no problems with that. They're dropping English bombs against Yemeni civilians.
It's terrible hypocrisy from the British government, and we should not be funding Saudi Arabia or selling weapons to them. Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Well, hang on, but you can't. That's really inconsistent from you, because
how is that inconsistent?
They are using those weapons against Iran. So who are apparently the ultimate evil that must be defeated at all costs. They are literally using those weapons in a proxy war against Iranian-backed troops. So wouldn't that be that's a good thing to use those weapons?
No, because that goes back to what Hamish said at the beginning, that an enemy of my enemy is not my friend.
Well, okay.
Well, I mean, if it wasn't for this general who's just been killed, ISIS would still be a significant threat in the Middle East. That's
and if it wasn't for the Assad regime, ISIS would be even stronger. Are we all friends with Assad?
No, we're not. But we have to give. He was in Iraq on a diplomatic mission. The Trump administration wanted to do some kind of negotiation or somewhat, and they killed him while he was delivering a message. Okay? I'm not clearing him of all of his crimes and all of his previous actions. I'm just saying that there is an unbelievable amount of inconsistency here. We treat similarly evil people differently. And
your objection to this is a breach of diplomatic etiquette.
No, I'm just saying we need to be a little bit more thoughtful about what our actions, the kind of consequences our actions create.
I don't disagree with that, but you've both been trumpeting the fact that this guy apparently, has been fighting ISIS, presumably out of the goodness of his heart, and he believes in a lovely liberal Western tolerance.
Obviously not.
Right? Would you take out Assad? Or do you think the United States or the United Kingdom or anyone should take out Assad?
No, I don't. I don't think we should take out anyone. I think we should get on with we've got issues in our own country. We've got food banks. Yeah. We've got issues of social welfare. We got problems here. We've got unbelievable NHS waiting times, and yet we are discussing about whether we should drop £1 million missiles and bombs and all on the other side of the world. I think that's crazy.
Yeah, but we're not doing that, are we? So I think that's quite.
Well, that's good.
We've been quite cautious.
It's all very well sorting out problems and having a lovely NHS and education system and all that. But safety, national security is the number one priority of any government. And these people, because we live in a globalized world where people can come over here, people can transmit their ideas, people can, attack Britons abroad, is very much our problem. And the fact, I think, that you wouldn't take out Assad, and I think the fact that the United Kingdom didn't take action in Syria because of Ed Miliband's nasty little games that he was playing, is a disgrace. I don't care if he stopped ISIS.
But you create the same problem. You create a power vacuum, and then what you end up getting is, unless there's a better plan, there's a broader plan of how you're going to take one dictator and what you're going to do with the country afterwards. And we're talking about a 20, 30 year, 40-year objective here, which the West isn't willing to commit to. Okay, we can take away one dictator, but then what? That's the question that you're not answering.
Well, that is a valid criticism of Western policy, but I don't think
the alternative doesn't work.
I don't think that it is the fact that we clearly have got it wrong before, and no one could argue with that, means that we shouldn't try it again.
I just think we've got to be very careful about adopting this carrying on with this Tony Blair approach of sort of over trading as a country now. I mean, we had massive, we got involved in massive engagements that we frankly didn't have the resources to continue to pay for, but yet we faced the consequences. So we faced the liabilities of those actions, massive influx of refugees, for instance, which has caused a certain amount of problems, and then massive ongoing payments for various things. And yet we didn't really get the assets, if you like, the other side of it. All we really got was the opprobrium and the problems caused by it. And I think that we need, my ideal post-Brexit British foreign policy would be for us to be a lot more transactional, cautious around what we're doing, and also really take a stance that protects British citizens, and not
abandoning America. Abandoning the Western Alliance is not the way
of course, I'm not saying we would abandon them. I'm just saying I think that this idea that we would somehow replace Brussels with Washington and get a better relationship in our foreign policy is absurd. We should be actually leveraging the one thing that Tony Blair was right about, which was that we can be a bridge between the two. What he was wrong about between the EU and the US, but what he was wrong about was that he was prepared to, of course, subsume the UK entirely into the EU to do that. We don't need to do that now. We can be nicely apart from both, and play a good moral role, as well as providing military support when it's necessary to support British citizens. But this is not necessary to support British citizens.
Well, this has been interesting. I think
lecturing the mullahs on the virtue of transgenderism. Then
look, I'm not. Look, Hamish, let's clear this up. I'm not here defending bad people in bad places. Okay, I'm just talking about how Western foreign policy, American foreign policy, doesn't take into consideration long-term objectives, which create a better world. Right now, what they did was completely irresponsible because they didn't know how Iran would react. And Iran, obviously, by what we saw last night, has the capability to pinpoint precision missiles far distances, and that's very.
But Amir, your alternative is to wait and to sanction and to wait more. We've been doing that for the last 30 years. This is like the Ramona.
Really.
This is like the Ramona's argument to stay in the EU and reform from within. It doesn't work.
We haven't done
we
it,
know
actually.
That.
We haven't been consistent with our foreign policy objectives with regards to the Middle East. We haven't been consistent, and this is a real problem. When we had issues with, for example, with South Africa, when we had issues with South Africa, we created a worldwide coalition where every country boycotted South African goods and created economic sanctions, which eventually caused the fall of apartheid. We could have done the same thing with any country in the world, but it requires not unilateral action, it requires multilateral action. America needs to be getting Russia, getting China, getting all countries around the world on one form of consensual action.
Imagine that, Western countries joining together to make some kind of group that we could all agree on values together and work together on. Imagine that. Thank you very much. This has been an interesting discussion. We'd like to hear your thoughts. Please comment below, like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.